The Echoes of Hollow Grove. Chapter 1. The Invitation. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the first hints of frost glistened on the grass and the air carried a sharp, invigorating chill. Emily Taylor was just beginning her day when the mail arrived, carried by a grumpy postman who barely acknowledged her. She sifted through the usual bills and junk mail before spotting something unusual, a weathered envelope addressed to her in elegant, archaic handwriting. The envelope's paper was thick and textured, almost like parchment, and had a distinct, musty smell. Emily turned it over, noticing a wax seal stamped with an intricate design that she couldn't quite make out. The postmark read Hollow Grove, and the name didn't ring any bells. She couldn't recall ever hearing of such a place, let alone receiving mail from it. Her heart quickened with excitement and curiosity as she carefully peeled the envelope open. Inside was a letter, written in the same ornate script. It read, "Dear Emily Taylor, you are cordially invited to a weekend retreat at Hollow Grove, a secluded estate known for its charm and tranquility. This is an opportunity to escape the mundane and experience a slice of history. Please join us for a memorable adventure. Your friends have already confirmed their attendance, and we eagerly await your presence. Yours sincerely, the curator." Emily's eyes lingered on the last line, the curator, and she wondered who this person was. The letter's tone was formal yet inviting, and the promise of adventure was too tempting to ignore. She could almost feel the pull of mystery and excitement emanating from the page. Feeling a thrill of anticipation, Emily immediately thought of her friends, Jake, Sarah, and Michael. Each one of them had a different reason for seeking a break from their everyday lives. Jake, with his penchant for the unconventional, was always up for an adventure. Sarah, who thrived on social gatherings and new experiences, would be delighted at the prospect of a weekend away. Michael, known for his deep curiosity about the supernatural, would jump at the chance to explore something mysterious. Without wasting any time, Emily picked up her phone and dialed Jake's number. It rang a few times before he answered. "Hey Jake, guess what? I just got this strange invitation to Hollow Grove. It's this secluded estate and, well, it sounds like a perfect getaway for us. What do you think?" Jake's voice was immediately enthusiastic. "Hollow Grove? That sounds intriguing. I'm in. Let's make it a weekend to remember." Next, Emily called Sarah and Michael. Sarah was just as excited as Jake, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Michael, after a brief pause, said, "It sounds like a place with a story to tell. Count me in." With all her friends on board, Emily felt a surge of excitement. The mundane routine of her daily life was about to be interrupted by something far more thrilling. She packed her bags with a mix of practical items and a few adventurous essentials: flashlights, a camera, and a notebook to document whatever they encountered. The day of departure arrived, and Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Michael gathered at her apartment. They were all in high spirits, each sharing their own theories about what Hollow Grove might hold. Sarah brought snacks, Jake carried a playlist of eerie tunes, and Michael had packed several books on local folklore and ghost stories. They piled into a rickety old van, a vintage model that looked like it had seen better days. The van's paint was chipped, and it had a nostalgic charm, but it seemed to fit the adventure perfectly. As they started their journey, the van's engine roared to life with a sound that felt oddly fitting for the road ahead. The drive was filled with laughter and speculation, but as they ventured further into the wilderness, the landscape began to change. The vibrant hues of autumn gave way to a more desolate terrain. The trees, now skeletal in their bare form, loomed over the road like ancient sentinels, their branches twisting and creaking with the wind. Emily glanced out the window, her excitement mingling with an odd sense of foreboding. The road narrowed, winding through dense forest that seemed to close in around them. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows that played tricks on their eyes. The air grew colder, and the warmth of their conversation seemed to dissipate into the encroaching twilight. Jake, sensing the growing unease, joked, "Maybe we're driving straight into a classic horror movie setting. Keep your eyes peeled for creepy creatures." Sarah laughed nervously, but Emily's attention was fixed on the trees. Every now and then, she thought she saw fleeting movements in the corners of her vision, something that seemed to follow their progress, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. As night fell, the road became a mere ribbon of darkness, the only light coming from the van's headlights cutting through the dense blackness. Emily felt her pulse quicken, a blend of anticipation and unease. They had left the familiar behind and were heading toward the unknown. Finally, they reached the entrance to Hollow Grove. The old, rusted gate creaked open as they pushed it, revealing a long driveway lined with overgrown grass and encroaching vines. The mansion at the end of the drive stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its imposing presence both alluring and foreboding. Emily could feel the weight of the place settling around them. As they unloaded their bags and prepared to enter, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. The estate seemed to hold its breath, waiting. As they crossed the threshold into the grand, decaying hallway, Emily took a deep breath. The adventure had truly begun. Chapter 2: The Drive. The van bumped and jostled along the uneven path, its tires skidding through loose gravel and fallen leaves. Outside, the autumn landscape transformed into an eerie tableau. The once vibrant foliage had given way to a barren, skeletal forest. The trees, stripped bare by the encroaching winter, stood like ghostly sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out as if trying to ensnare the unwary travelers. Emily sat by the window, watching the changing scenery with a mixture of fascination and unease. The air inside the van was filled with the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the old radio playing a playlist of classic rock. The rhythmic beat of the music contrasted sharply with the growing sense of foreboding outside. As they drove deeper into the wilderness, the road became less defined. What had started as a dirt path now felt like a narrow, overgrown trail, barely discernible amidst the encroaching undergrowth. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, sinuous shadows that twisted and writhed like dark fingers reaching out from the undergrowth. These shadows seemed to play tricks on the eye, making the forest seem alive with hidden movement. Sarah, seated beside Emily, glanced nervously at the map spread across her lap. "Are we sure this is the right way?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked up from the crumpled map. Jake, sitting in the driver's seat, glanced in the rearview mirror and flashed a reassuring grin. "Don't worry, Sarah. We're just getting into the heart of it. Maybe the ghosts are just a few miles ahead. We'll be fine." His attempt at humor was met with a half-hearted chuckle from Michael, who was engrossed in a book on local legends. Michael looked up from his reading, his eyes glinting with a mixture of skepticism and excitement. "Jake's right. This is all part of the experience. Besides, I've read that the best stories come from the most unexpected places." Emily wasn't so sure. She had always been the one to seek out adventure, but something about this journey felt different. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her seat as she stared out the window. The trees seemed to close in on them, their gnarled branches scratching against the van's exterior like the fingertips of unseen hands. A chill ran down her spine, and she shivered involuntarily. It felt as though something or someone was watching them, hidden in the shadows. Her gaze darted to the forest's edge, where the dark silhouettes of trees swayed in the wind. Occasionally, she thought she saw fleeting movements, a flicker of light or a shadow that didn't quite match the others. But every time she tried to focus, the sight was gone. "Emily, you okay?" Sarah asked, noticing her friend's anxious demeanor. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just, it's a little unnerving, that's all. The way the shadows move." Jake's grin widened as he glanced over his shoulder. "You're just letting your imagination run wild. It's probably just the play of light through the trees." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The van's headlights cast a harsh, artificial glow that did little to dispel the encroaching darkness. The woods seemed to absorb the light, making it feel as though they were driving through a tunnel of blackness. Every now and then, the van's headlights would catch something reflective in the distance. An eye, perhaps, or a glimmer of something metallic. But when Emily tried to focus, there was nothing there. As they rounded a sharp bend, the road narrowed even further, and the trees seemed to close in around them. The forest was dense and unyielding, and the only sound was the van's tires crunching over the uneven surface. The air was growing colder, and the van's interior seemed to get progressively gloomier. Emily leaned forward, trying to peer through the darkness. The road ahead seemed to disappear into a void, and the unsettling silence was only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. It was as if they were being drawn deeper into an ancient, forgotten place. "I think we might need to slow down," Michael suggested, breaking the silence. "The road's getting pretty rough." Jake nodded and reduced their speed, his usual confidence waning as the van bumped over a particularly deep rut. "Yeah, I'm starting to think this place might be more remote than we were led to believe." The van's headlights flickered as they navigated through a particularly dense stretch of forest. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their dark branches intertwining above them like the twisted fingers of some malevolent force. Emily's sense of unease grew stronger with every passing moment. Suddenly, there was a loud thump against the side of the van, causing everyone to jump. Jake slammed on the brakes, and the vehicle lurched to a stop. They all looked at each other, startled. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily peered out the window, her heart pounding. The darkness beyond the glass was impenetrable, and she could see nothing except for the dim glow of the headlights illuminating the surrounding trees. The thump seemed to have come from somewhere in the woods, but there was no sign of what could have caused it. "Let's not overthink it," Jake said, trying to sound nonchalant as he restarted the van. "Probably just a branch or something. We're almost there. I'm sure of it." The van lurched forward again, but the atmosphere had shifted. The earlier sense of excitement had been replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. The road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly, leading them deeper into the unknown. As the van continued its slow, hesitant journey, Emily couldn't help but glance nervously at the trees. They seemed to watch and whisper, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to pull them into the depths of the forest. She could almost hear the faint echoes of distant, haunting whispers carried on the wind. The van's headlights flickered again, casting eerie shadows that danced and morphed into grotesque shapes. Emily's grip tightened on her seat as she forced herself to stay calm. The adventure they had anticipated with such eagerness was quickly becoming a journey into the heart of darkness, and the unknown was closing in around them. Chapter 3: The Estate. When they finally arrived at Hollow Grove, the estate loomed before them like a specter from another era. The van pulled to a halt at the end of the long gravel driveway, and the friends stepped out, their breath forming faint clouds in the chill of the evening air. The mansion was an imposing structure, its grandeur now overshadowed by years of neglect. The stone facade, once proud and imposing, was now weathered and grim, with cracks running like veins through the gray surface. The mansion seemed to sigh as the wind rustled through the overgrown ivy that climbed its walls. The once manicured lawn was now a tangle of wild grass and creeping weeds. Tall, unkempt hedges bordered the path, their leaves rustling softly as if whispering secrets to those who dared approach. The rusty wrought iron gate, which had been left ajar, creaked mournfully as they pushed it open, the sound echoing eerily through the silence. The driveway, long and winding, led up to the front entrance. The large, wooden double doors were dark and heavy, adorned with intricate carvings that were barely visible under layers of dust. The friends exchanged uneasy glances as they approached the entrance, the foreboding atmosphere pressing in on them from all sides. Jake reached for the door handle, but it was Sarah who pushed it open. The door groaned loudly, its hinges protesting against years of disuse. As they stepped inside, the dim light of the setting sun filtered through grimy, stained glass windows, casting eerie, fragmented patterns on the floor. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged wood and mildew, mingling with the faint, musty odor of disuse. Dust motes floated lazily in the dim light, dancing like tiny specters across the room. The grand foyer was vast, with a high ceiling supported by dark wooden beams. An ornate staircase, its banister intricately carved but worn smooth from years of use, ascended to the upper floors. The floor was covered with a faded, once luxurious rug that had seen better days. It was now threadbare in places, and a layer of dust had settled over it. The room was furnished with broken and covered furniture, ornate chairs with torn upholstery, a cracked grandfather clock that had long since stopped ticking, and a large, tarnished mirror that reflected the dim light in unsettling ways. As Emily and her friends moved deeper into the house, they were struck by the sense of stillness that pervaded every corner. Each room seemed to tell its own story, from the grand dining hall with its long, dust-covered table and cobweb-covered chandelier to the faded elegance of the drawing room, where moth-eaten drapes hung limply at the windows. The group wandered through the rooms, their footsteps echoing off the walls. In one corner, Emily found a collection of old portraits, stately figures in faded clothing with somber expressions, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. She shivered as she noticed the resemblance to the house's architecture, as if these people had once been the guardians of the estate. Michael, always the curious one, began to explore the library. The room was filled with shelves of ancient, leather-bound books, their spines cracked and yellowed with age. The scent of old paper and ink was strong, and Michael's fingers traced the spines of the books as he pulled a few from the shelves. He found a stack of journals, their covers dust-covered and brittle. Flipping through them, he noticed they were filled with handwritten notes and sketches that hinted at the mansion's storied past. Jake and Sarah made their way to the kitchen, which was equally neglected. The once grand cooking area was now a grimy, cobweb-strewn space with rusted appliances and a broken sink. The kitchen table was covered with a thick layer of dust, and scattered around were old, tarnished utensils and faded recipe cards. A large fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and empty. As the group reconvened in the foyer, the sun dipped lower, casting the mansion into deeper shadows. The friends gathered around the fireplace, which was now the central feature of the room. Jake threw a few logs into the grate, and Sarah lit the kindling, the flickering flames casting a warm, if uneven, glow across the room. The fire crackled to life, and the shadows seemed to dance along the walls, their movements almost as if they were alive. "This place is incredible," Jake said, trying to mask his unease with enthusiasm. "It's like stepping back in time." Emily, however, felt a growing sense of discomfort. The house seemed to breathe around them, its creaks and groans adding to the eerie atmosphere. The feeling of being watched, which had started on the drive, was now more pronounced. Every shadow seemed to shift and move, and the silence was occasionally broken by unexplained noises. A distant thud, a rustling sound from somewhere above, or the soft, eerie whisper of wind through the broken windows. Sarah, attempting to lighten the mood, suggested exploring the upper floors to find their rooms. Let's see what the upstairs has to offer. I'm sure there are some interesting surprises waiting for us. With renewed determination, the group ascended the grand staircase, the wood groaning beneath their weight. The upper floors were even more decrepit than the ground level. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing patches of old, faded patterns. The rooms were filled with more antique furniture, broken beds, cracked mirrors, and dusty, neglected heirlooms. Emily's attention was drawn to a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. She pushed it open and found a room that had clearly been untouched for decades. A canopy bed, its drapes tattered and moth-eaten, stood against one wall. The room was filled with personal items, old photographs, a forgotten diary, and a lonesome rocking chair that creaked slightly as if in response to their presence. The room had an air of melancholy, as if the past inhabitants had left in a hurry, leaving behind fragments of their lives. Emily picked up the diary, its leather cover cracked and worn. She opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with beautiful but faded handwriting. The entries spoke of daily life and a gradual descent into despair, hinting at the mansion's tragic past. As they settled into their respective rooms, the house seemed to settle with them. The settling of the old mansion created an almost rhythmic pattern of creaks and groans that echoed through the halls. Emily lay in bed, her mind racing with the day's events and the growing sense of unease that hung over the estate. The mansion was more than just an old house. It was a character in its own right, alive with secrets and shadows. The sense of history and the palpable weight of the past seemed to press in on Emily and her friends, making it clear that their adventure was only just beginning. Chapter 4: The First Night. The evening at Hollow Grove was a stark contrast to the unsettling journey that had brought the friends to the estate. The grand living room, warmed by the glow of the large stone fireplace, was filled with a sense of camaraderie and laughter as they tried to make the best of their situation. The flames flickered and crackled, casting playful shadows on the walls and creating a cozy atmosphere that belied the mansion's foreboding exterior. Jake had taken charge of preparing a meal, improvising with canned goods and snacks they had brought along. He made light-hearted jokes and exaggerated tales about the estate's supposed ghostly inhabitants, aiming to distract his friends from the growing unease that had settled over them. Sarah and Michael joined in with their own stories and laughter, their voices mingling with the soft pop and hiss of the fire. Emily, however, found it difficult to fully relax. The sense of being watched, which had started on their drive, seemed to intensify as the evening wore on. Despite the warmth of the fire and the conviviality of her friends, a gnawing sense of discomfort clung to her. Her eyes wandered to the dark corners of the room, where the light from the fire failed to reach, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something or someone lurking just beyond the edges of the flickering light. As they finished their meal and the conversation gradually wound down, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The fire's glow dimmed, and the shadows on the walls grew longer and more pronounced. The friends made their way to their respective rooms, the mansion's silence now more palpable than ever. Emily's room was located at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. The hallway was lined with old, dusty portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. She could hear the soft creaking of the wooden floorboards beneath her feet, and each sound seemed to reverberate through the emptiness of the house. Once she reached her room, Emily tried to shake off the unease. The room was a large, ornate space with an antique four-poster bed draped in faded, moth-eaten fabric. The furniture was heavy and dark, and the room was filled with the musty smell of disuse. She attempted to settle into the bed, but sleep eluded her as her mind replayed the strange sensations she had felt throughout the day. The The shadows on the walls danced in time with the flickering light of the fireplace, creating a surreal and unsettling play of shapes. Emily turned over, trying to find a comfortable position, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Her ears were attuned to every creak and groan of the house, and she found herself straining to identify each sound. It was then that she heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the hallway just outside her door. At first, it was so soft that she thought it might be a trick of her imagination, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It sounded like someone, or something, was scratching or scraping against the wood of the door. Emily's heart raced, and she held her breath, straining to listen. The scratching was rhythmic, almost as if it were deliberate. She pulled the covers tightly around her and tried to convince herself it was just the house settling or a stray branch brushing against the window. But the sound continued, growing more pronounced. Emily's curiosity battled with her fear. She wanted to investigate, but the thought of what might be lurking in the dark made her hesitate. The scratching grew louder, and Emily could hear the subtle scraping of nails against wood, accompanied by a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. Summoning all her courage, Emily slid out of bed and moved cautiously toward the door. She pressed her ear against it, trying to discern the source of the sound. The whispering was now more distinct, though still unintelligible, and it seemed to come from the other side of the door. She turned the doorknob slowly, her hand trembling as she pulled the door open a crack. The corridor outside was shrouded in darkness, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the old wallpaper and the distant crackle of the fireplace in the living room. Emily peered into the hallway, but saw nothing amiss. The scratching sound had ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Emily stepped out into the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly. The corridor was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting elongated shadows that twisted and shifted. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her with their hollow eyes, and the silence was punctuated only by the distant creak of the house. As she walked down the hall, the unsettling feeling of being watched returned with full force. Every creak and rustle seemed amplified in the silence, and the shadows appeared to move with a life of their own. Emily reached the end of the corridor and found the source of the scratching sound. A large, dusty spiderweb had formed in the corner of the hallway, and a small branch from an overgrown tree outside was brushing against the window. Relieved but still uneasy, Emily turned to head back to her room. Just as she was about to close the door, she heard a soft thud from behind her. Whirling around, she saw nothing but the empty hallway. The thud was followed by a faint, almost imperceptible whispering that seemed to come from all around her. The whispering grew louder, and Emily's pulse quickened. She turned back to her room, quickly closing the door and locking it behind her. She sank onto the edge of her bed, her heart pounding in her chest. The scratching and whispering continued for a few more minutes before gradually fading into silence. Emily lay back down, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The sense of being watched was still there, lingering in the darkness. She stared up at the ceiling, the shadows from the fireplace creating eerie shapes on the walls. Despite her exhaustion, sleep remained elusive. The mansion seemed to pulse with an unseen presence, and the unsettling whispers echoed in her mind. Outside her room, the house settled into a deeper silence, the only sound the soft, rhythmic creaking of the old structure. The mansion's secrets lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be uncovered as the night stretched on. Chapter 5: The Disappearance. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows, casting a faint glow over the grand foyer of Hollow Grove. Emily stirred in her bed, feeling the weight of the previous night's unease still heavy upon her. She had barely slept, her mind plagued with restless thoughts and disturbing whispers. The fire had long since died down, leaving the room cold and silent. As Emily made her way downstairs, she noticed the house seemed eerily quiet. There was no sound of laughter or conversation, which was unusual given how lively the night before had been. She reached the ground floor and found Sarah and Jake already gathered in the living room, their expressions a mix of concern and confusion. "Have you seen Michael?" Sarah asked, her voice quivering slightly. She was clutching a worn robe around her shoulders, her eyes wide with worry. Emily's heart sank as she shook her head. "No, I thought he'd be down by now. Have you checked his room?" Jake, looking increasingly anxious, nodded. "His bed's untouched, and his stuff is scattered around. It's like he left in a hurry." The three of them rushed upstairs to Michael's room, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the room was a mess. Michael's belongings were strewn about, his backpack open with clothes and personal items spilling out. The bed was unmade, and there were no signs of him having left deliberately. The sense of panic grew as they searched the room. Sarah found a note on the floor, crumpled and partially hidden beneath a pile of clothes. She picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. The note was barely legible, written in hurried, uneven handwriting. "I'm sorry. It's not safe. You need to leave." Emily's stomach tightened as she read the note. What does he mean? It's not safe? And why would he leave without saying anything? Jake paced the room, his face pale. "We need to find him. He could be in trouble." The three friends split up to search the estate, calling out for Michael as they combed through every room. The mansion's vastness seemed to amplify their sense of isolation, and their voices echoed hauntingly off the walls. They checked the garden and the surrounding grounds, but there was no sign of Michael. Emily's anxiety grew with every passing minute. As she wandered through the mansion's dimly lit corridors, she began to notice more unsettling details. In one of the rooms, she found footprints leading to a wall. They seemed to appear out of nowhere, stopping abruptly against the stone. There were no tracks leading away from the wall, just a pair of footprints that seemed to end in midair. Her heart pounded as she continued her search. In another room, she discovered strange symbols etched into the walls. They were crude, almost primitive, and appeared to be scrawled in something that resembled dried blood. The symbols were jagged and chaotic, adding to the growing sense of dread. Emily stumbled upon an old family portrait, its frame dusty and cracked. The photograph depicted a group of people dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their expressions solemn and distant. What caught her eye, though, was that all the faces in the photograph had been scratched out with a heavy hand. The image was unsettling, the defaced faces hinting at a dark history she couldn't quite grasp. As Emily examined the symbols and photographs, she felt a cold breeze blow through the corridor, despite the windows being shut. The temperature in the mansion seemed to drop suddenly, and the air grew thick with an oppressive, almost palpable sense of dread. Every shadow seemed to shift and writhe as if alive, and the whispers from the night before began to echo in her mind once more. Sarah and Jake regrouped with Emily in the living room, their faces etched with worry. They had found no sign of Michael, and the house seemed to hold its secrets close. The unsettling discoveries only added to their anxiety. "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We have to find him. We can't just stay here." Emily, trying to keep her composure, suggested, "We need to keep searching. There must be something we're missing. Maybe Michael left us a clue." They resumed their search with renewed determination, but the mansion seemed to mock their efforts. The more they looked, the more elusive Michael became. The house's secrets appeared to be just out of reach, and the sense of unease grew stronger with each passing hour. Emily, driven by a growing sense of desperation, returned to Michael's room to search for any additional clues. As she sifted through his belongings, she found a small, leather-bound journal tucked away in the corner of his suitcase. She opened it carefully, her hands shaking. The journal was filled with Michael's observations and notes about the estate, detailing his growing curiosity and unease. One entry caught her eye. "I feel like I'm being watched. The house seems alive, and I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I need to find out more, but I'm afraid of what I might uncover." Emily's heart raced as she read the entry. It seemed that Michael had been experiencing the same unsettling sensations that she had felt. His notes hinted at a deeper mystery hidden within the walls of Hollow Grove. Determined to find answers, Emily gathered Sarah and Jake and shared what she had discovered. The journal's entries provided clues, but they also deepened the mystery surrounding the estate. It was clear that Hollow Grove held dark secrets, and Michael's disappearance was just the beginning. As the day faded into evening, the friends' fear and desperation grew. The mansion seemed to close in around them, its walls holding secrets that were just out of reach. The shadows lengthened, and the sense of being watched intensified. The friends were left with a chilling realization. The estate was not just a backdrop for their adventure, but an active participant in their fear. And the deeper they delved, the more the house seemed to resist their efforts, hiding its secrets and threatening to consume them all. Chapter 6. The Secrets of Hollow Grove. Determined to unravel the mystery behind Michael's disappearance, Emily set out to explore the more hidden and neglected areas of Hollow Grove. The mansion, with its labyrinthine hallways and vast, uncharted spaces, seemed almost designed to conceal its secrets. As the storm outside intensified, Emily realized they might be trapped for the foreseeable future. She knew that understanding the estate's dark past might be their only chance of finding Michael and escaping the mansion's grasp. The attic was a vast, shadowy expanse, accessible only by a narrow, creaky staircase. Emily ascended the stairs with trepidation, the darkness growing thicker with each step. When she reached the top, she found a heavy wooden door, its surface scarred with age. She pushed it open, and a musty, stale odor wafted out, mingling with the scent of damp wood. Inside, the attic was cluttered with old furniture covered in white sheets, stacks of yellowed newspapers, and boxes filled with forgotten belongings. The dim light from a small, dirty window cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the dust particles floating in the air look like tiny specters. Emily began to sift through the boxes and old trunks, her hands brushing off layers of dust. Among the items, she found old clothing, faded photographs, and journals. One journal, bound in leather and appearing more recent than the others, caught her attention. It was filled with detailed entries about the estate's history and the lives of its previous inhabitants. One entry described a series of peculiar occurrences, objects moving on their own, strange noises, and a feeling of being watched. The last entry was particularly disturbing. "The Watcher is here. It knows everything. I'm afraid it will come for me next." Emily's heart raced as she read the entry. It seemed to confirm the existence of a malevolent presence in the house. She continued to explore the attic, finding more evidence of the house's dark past, old letters, diaries, and even a few cryptic sketches depicting a shadowy figure with hollow eyes. With new determination, Emily descended to the basement. The stairs were narrow and steep, and the air grew colder as she approached the bottom. The basement was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting long, wavering shadows on the stone walls. The space was cluttered with old furniture, broken appliances, and discarded items. A large, iron-bound door at the far end of the room caught Emily's attention. She approached the door cautiously, noting the rust and decay that had accumulated over the years. The door was locked, but Emily found a set of old keys on a nearby shelf. Her hands trembled as she selected a key and inserted it into the lock. With a groan, the door creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Inside the chamber was a small, dimly lit room filled with more unsettling discoveries. There were several old wooden chests, their surfaces covered in dust and cobwebs. Emily opened them one by one, finding more letters, photographs, and personal effects. Among them was a series of letters from different families, all detailing their experiences with unexplained phenomena in the house. The letters spoke of the Watcher, an enigmatic figure who seemed to have a personal interest in each family that stayed at Hollow Grove. One particularly chilling letter described a pattern of disappearances that coincided with the arrival of the Watcher. The author had written about their growing fear and the increasing sense of dread as the Watcher's presence became more pronounced. The letter ended with a desperate plea for help, but it was clear that no help had arrived. Next, Emily decided to investigate the old servants' quarters, located in a separate wing of the mansion. The quarters were as neglected as the rest of the estate, with dust-covered furniture and broken windows. The air was musty, and the rooms were filled with forgotten personal belongings, old uniforms, tarnished silverware, and a few faded photographs. As Emily rummaged through the rooms, she found a small desk with a locked drawer. After some effort, she managed to open it, revealing a collection of old ledgers and personal notes. The ledgers detailed the daily lives of the estate staff, including their interactions with the Watcher. One entry stood out. It described a series of odd requests from the estate's owners, asking the staff to perform strange rituals and ceremonies. The notes hinted at a dark pact made with an otherworldly entity, suggesting that the Watcher was more than just a ghostly presence. It was a powerful and malevolent force bound to the estate. As Emily absorbed these revelations, a loud crash echoed through the mansion. Startled, she dropped the papers and ran back to the main areas of the house, her mind racing with the implications of what she had discovered. By the time Emily rejoined Sarah and Jake in the living room, the storm outside had intensified. The howling wind and driving rain battered the windows, and the power flickered erratically. The mansion's isolation was now more apparent than ever. The roads were blocked by fallen trees and debris, leaving them stranded. Jake paced the room nervously. "We're trapped here, and we don't even know if Michael's safe. We need to figure out how to get out of this place." Emily, her face pale, shared her findings. "I've discovered more about the Watcher. It seems like it has a pattern of making people disappear. There are mentions of rituals and a dark pact in the old letters I found. The Watcher isn't just a ghost. It's a powerful force that's been influencing the estate for decades." Sarah shivered as she listened. "So what do we do now? We're stuck here, and Michael's still missing." Emily's mind raced. "We need to understand the Watcher's motives and how it operates. If there's a pattern to the disappearances, there might be a way to break the cycle. But first, we need to find out if there's a way to communicate with or confront this entity." The storm raged outside, and the mansion seemed to grow colder with each passing minute. The friends were left to grapple with the grim reality of their situation. Hollow Grove was not just an old house. It was a living nightmare, its secrets woven into every creak and shadow. As the night fell and the storm continued, the friends braced themselves for what lay ahead, knowing that the answers they sought might come at a great cost. Chapter 7: The Revelation. As darkness fell once more, Hollow Grove transformed into a labyrinth of shadow and silence. The howling wind outside battered the windows, its mournful cries echoing through the vast, empty halls of the estate. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Emily, Sarah, and Jake had retreated to the library, a grand, dusty room lined with towering bookshelves and lit only by the flickering light of a single, struggling lamp. The library was eerily quiet, save for the occasional groan of the old house and the relentless storm outside. The friends huddled together, their faces illuminated by the dim light, as they spread out the various documents and clues Emily had found. They hoped that by piecing together the fragmented information, they might uncover a way to escape and understand the true nature of the Watcher. Emily's eyes roamed over the piles of letters and old photographs scattered across the library's antique table. Her hand brushed against a loose brick in the fireplace. Curiosity piqued. She examined it closely and found that it could be pushed inward. With some effort, she managed to dislodge the brick, revealing a small cavity hidden behind it. Inside the cavity was an old leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and worn with age. Emily's hands trembled as she opened the journal, the pages yellowed and fragile. The handwriting inside was neat and meticulous, chronicling events that seemed to match the strange occurrences they had experienced. The journal's entries told a tragic and disturbing tale. It described a group of people who had been invited to the estate under false pretenses, promised a luxurious retreat and a chance to escape their mundane lives. Instead, they were lured into a nightmarish trap. The entries detailed how the guests began to experience inexplicable phenomena: voices in the dark, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of dread. One particular entry was more detailed and chilling. The Watcher is not a mere specter or ghost. It is the house itself, a living entity that feeds on the fear of those who enter. It draws people in with promises of solace, only to trap them in a cycle of terror. We are but pawns in its game, and it delights in our suffering. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she read the entry aloud to Sarah and Jake. The words painted a grim picture of their situation. Hollow Grove was not merely haunted. It was alive and malevolent, preying on their fears to maintain its grip on them. Sarah's face was pale, and she clutched her arms around herself. So the Watcher is the house? That means it's not just an outside force. It's part of the estate itself. Jake's eyes widened with realization. If the house feeds on our fear, then maybe that's why it's been so relentless. It's trying to keep us scared and trapped. Emily nodded, her mind racing with the implications. We need to break the cycle somehow. If the house thrives on our fear, then maybe we can weaken it by confronting it directly. But we have to find out more about how it operates. As they discussed their options, the storm outside intensified, the wind rattling the windows and the rain lashing against the panes with a furious intensity. The storm seemed to mirror the turmoil within the mansion, amplifying their sense of isolation. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the upper floors, followed by a series of unsettling noises. The friends exchanged worried glances, and Emily's heart raced. We need to check that out. It might be another clue or something related to Michael's disappearance. They ascended the staircase cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The sounds seemed to come from the attic, and as they approached, the air grew colder, and an oppressive silence fell over them. The attic door was ajar, and the light from their flashlight revealed a scene of disarray. Boxes overturned, papers scattered, and a sense of chaos in the once cluttered room. In the midst of the mess, they found something unexpected: a small, hidden compartment in the wall. Inside the compartment were more documents and a peculiar artifact, a tarnished silver locket with intricate engravings. The locket was cold to the touch, and as Emily opened it, she found an old photograph of a woman with a mournful expression. The accompanying letter, written in the same neat handwriting as the journal, explained that the woman in the photograph had been one of the early victims of the house. She had been part of a group that sought to escape their troubles, only to fall victim to the Watcher. The letter also hinted at a way to break free, a ritual that could sever the bond between the house and its victims. The ritual involved a series of steps: confronting the entity directly, acknowledging its existence, and demonstrating courage in the face of its terror. The letter detailed how the ritual had been attempted in the past but had failed due to the participants' fear. It seemed that only those who could truly confront their fears and stand firm would have a chance of succeeding. Emily shared the letter with Sarah and Jake, her voice trembling with determination. "We need to perform this ritual. It's our best chance of breaking free from the house's control and finding Michael." Jake nodded, his face set with resolve. "Let's do it. We don't have much time. The storm isn't letting up, and the house seems to be growing stronger." The friends gathered the necessary items for the ritual: candles, the locket, and the documents detailing the process. They prepared to face the Watcher, knowing that it would be a harrowing experience. The storm outside continued to rage, its fury a fitting backdrop to the battle they were about to undertake. As they prepared for the ritual, the mansion seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadows grew darker, reflecting the increasing tension and fear. But Emily and her friends were resolved to confront the Watcher, hoping that their courage and determination would be enough to break the cycle and free themselves from Hollow Grove's malevolent grasp. Chapter 8: The Confrontation. The storm outside had reached a fever pitch. The howling wind and relentless rain battered the mansion, creating an almost apocalyptic atmosphere. Inside Hollow Grove, the tension was palpable as Emily, Sarah, and Jake prepared themselves for the confrontation with the entity they had come to understand as the Watcher. They had gathered everything they needed for the ritual: the candles, the locket, and the ancient documents detailing the steps. The library had become their staging ground, and the trio set about preparing for what they hoped would be their final stand against the malevolent force that had ensnared them. Emily, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her, spoke to her friends. "We have to be united in this. The ritual requires us to confront the Watcher directly. We must face our fears and stand together." Jake nodded, his face grim but determined. "We've come this far. We need to see this through." Sarah, who had been quiet, looked up with a resolute expression. "Let's do it. For Michael and for ourselves." With a final deep breath, they extinguished the lights and began setting up the candles in a circle in the center of the library. They placed the locket in the center and arranged the documents around it, following the ritual's instructions to the letter. Once everything was in place, they took their positions within the circle and began the ritual, speaking the incantations from the documents with a blend of fear and resolve. As they chanted, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and the storm outside seemed to converge with their own growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. The walls of the library shimmered and distorted, as though reality itself was being twisted. The candles flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced and writhed. Emily, Sarah, and Jake could feel the presence of the Watcher growing stronger, its power coalescing around them. With a sudden jolt, the air in the library seemed to compress, and a low, rumbling sound emanated from the walls. The library transformed before their eyes. The familiar room was replaced by a dark, ancient chamber hidden deep within the estate, a place that seemed both timeless and nightmarish. The chamber was vast and circular, its walls covered in bizarre symbols and inscriptions that glowed faintly in the dim light of the candles. The floor was made of black stone, and the ceiling arched high above, lost in shadows. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal, upon which rested a large, ornate mirror. The mirror's surface was dark and reflective, like a pool of ink. As Emily, Sarah, and Jake stepped into the chamber, their surroundings seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls shifted and pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the mirror began to ripple as though it were a liquid surface disturbed by unseen forces. From the depths of the shadows emerged grotesque and nightmarish forms, manifestations of their deepest fears and anxieties. They were twisted versions of familiar figures, the faces of loved ones, distorted and corrupted, and monstrous creatures that seemed to be made of darkness itself. Emily saw a grotesque version of herself, its eyes hollow and its smile wide and menacing. The creature seemed to mock her, reflecting her insecurities and self-doubt. Sarah was confronted by a monstrous figure with elongated limbs and a gaping, tooth-filled maw, representing her fear of being consumed by her own fears. Jake faced an entity that appeared as a dark, writhing mass, representing his dread of losing control and being overwhelmed. The nightmarish figures moved towards them, their forms shifting and changing, as though they were made of smoke and shadow. The friends could feel the intense fear coursing through them, threatening to overpower their will. The chamber seemed to close in around them, the Watcher's presence amplifying their terror. Emily, her heart pounding, realized that the Watcher fed on their fear, growing stronger with every moment of terror they experienced. She knew they had to confront their fears head-on, not just for their own sake, but for Michael's as well. The ritual required them to demonstrate courage and resolve. With a deep breath, Emily stepped forward, facing her grotesque doppelganger. She focused on the figure, drawing strength from her own resolve. "You're not real. You're just a manifestation of my fears. I won't let you control me." As she spoke, the figure wavered, its form flickering and distorting. Emily's determination seemed to weaken its hold. Sarah and Jake, seeing Emily's bravery, followed suit. Sarah faced her monstrous fear with newfound strength, shouting, "I will not be consumed by you." As she did, the figure recoiled and began to dissipate. Jake confronted his writhing mass of darkness, his voice steady as he declared, "I am in control of my own destiny." Their combined resolve seemed to weaken the manifestations, causing the nightmarish figures to dissolve into swirling shadows. The chamber itself seemed to respond to their courage, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly as the figures faded away. With the figures vanquished, Emily approached the mirror at the center of the chamber. Its surface was now calm, reflecting the three friends with a haunting clarity. The mirror seemed to hold the key to understanding the Watcher's true nature. As Emily gazed into the mirror, she saw an image of the estate's history unfold. It showed the mansion's transformation over the years, how it had been built and how the Watcher had taken root within it. The Watcher was not just a malevolent entity, but a symbiotic force bound to the estate, feeding on fear to maintain its power. The reflection revealed a crucial detail, a hidden mechanism within the mirror that, when activated, could sever the bond between the Watcher and the estate. Emily, with shaking hands, reached out and pressed a hidden lever behind the mirror's frame. The mirror's surface rippled and began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light. As the light from the mirror grew brighter, the chamber's oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The walls of the chamber seemed to tremble, and the dark energy that had pervaded the estate began to dissipate. The Watcher's presence seemed to wane, its hold on the mansion weakening. Emily, Sarah, and Jake felt a surge of hope as the chamber's dark energy dissipated. The storm outside began to abate, and the mansion's oppressive atmosphere lifted. The sense of being watched receded, replaced by a newfound sense of freedom. They hurried out of the chamber, making their way back to the library. The estate's corridors, once suffused with a sense of menace, now seemed calmer. The mansion no longer felt alive with malevolent energy, and the storm outside had finally begun to clear. As they regrouped in the library, Emily, Sarah, and Jake felt a profound sense of relief. They had confronted their fears and faced the Watcher directly, breaking its hold on the estate. The house, though still old and eerie, no longer exuded the same sense of malevolence. The friends knew that their ordeal was not over completely, but they had taken a significant step towards reclaiming their freedom. They resolved to continue their search for Michael, hopeful that with the Watcher's influence diminished, they might be able to find him and escape Hollow Grove's clutches. With renewed determination, they prepared to search the mansion once more, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm had passed, and the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, symbolizing a new beginning and the possibility of hope amidst the darkness. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Ally. As the first light of dawn began to seep into the library, Emily, Sarah, and Jake felt a flicker of hope. The storm had subsided, and the oppressive atmosphere of the mansion seemed to lift. Yet, despite their relief, they knew their task was far from over. Michael's disappearance weighed heavily on their minds, and they were determined to find him and secure their escape from Hollow Grove. Just as they were about to embark on another search, a sudden eerie silence fell over the library. The candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emily, Sarah, and Jake froze, their senses heightened. The storm outside had ceased, but an unsettling calm had settled over the mansion. A figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the library. It was Michael. Emily's heart leaped with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Michael, you're back!" Michael stepped into the dim light, but his appearance was disconcerting. His eyes were vacant, hollowed out as if something had drained the life from them. His once familiar face was now a mask of numb resignation, and his movements were slow and deliberate, like a marionette with its strings pulled by an unseen hand. Jake took a step forward, his voice trembling with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Michael, what happened to you? Where have you been?" Michael's voice was eerily calm and devoid of emotion. "I was given a choice by the entity, the Watcher. I could either become part of its collection of lost souls or betray you all to ensure my own escape." Sarah gasped, her face pale with fear. You were going to betray us?" Michael's gaze was distant. "I didn't want to, but the Watcher's power is overwhelming. Twisted my mind, made me doubt everything. I was close to giving in when something changed. I couldn't do it. I couldn't betray you." Emily, trying to make sense of the situation, reached out to him. "Michael, we've confronted the Watcher. We've done everything we can to break its hold. There must be a way for us to escape." Michael's eyes, though still hollow, seemed to focus on Emily with a glimmer of recognition. "There is a way, but it won't be easy. The Watcher thrives on fear, and it will do everything in its power to stop us. We need to confront it again, together." The friends exchanged worried glances, their fears rekindled by Michael's unsettling return. Yet they knew they had little choice. They had come so far, and they couldn't afford to falter now. Guided by Michael, the friends made their way through the mansion, which now felt colder and more foreboding than ever. The once familiar corridors seemed to shift and change, as if the house itself was trying to disorient them. The storm outside had cleared, but the sky was overcast, casting a gloomy light through the windows. Michael led them to a hidden staircase at the back of the mansion, concealed behind a large tapestry. The stairs descended into a dark, underground passage. The air grew colder with each step, and the friends' breaths became visible in the chill. The passage eventually opened into a large, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the chamber was a large, ornate altar, its surface covered with arcane symbols and rituals inscribed in an ancient language. The Watcher's presence was palpable, its dark energy permeating the room and causing the shadows to writhe and twist. The Watcher itself, an indistinct shadowy form, seemed to loom at the far end of the chamber, its form shifting and changing with a malevolent presence. Emily, Sarah, Jake, and Michael positioned themselves around the altar. Emily took a deep breath and began to speak the incantations from the ritual documents. The others joined in, their voices steady despite their fear. The Watcher's presence seemed to grow stronger in response, its form expanding and darkening. As they chanted, the Watcher's form became more defined. It took on a more solid, terrifying appearance, an amalgamation of their fears and doubts. The air was thick with an oppressive force, and the chamber seemed to contract with each word of the incantation. The Watcher's form began to shift and distort, taking on grotesque shapes that reflected each of the friends' deepest fears. Emily saw the Watcher as a monstrous version of herself, embodying her insecurities and fears of failure. Sarah faced a nightmarish vision of being alone and abandoned, her worst fears coming to life. Jake saw a monstrous, dark version of himself, representing his fear of losing control and being overwhelmed. The Watcher's power intensified, and the chamber's energy seemed to pulse with dark, malevolent force. The friends were pushed to their limits, their fears threatening to engulf them. But they held their ground, their resolve unwavering. Michael, despite his hollowed appearance, played a crucial role. He began to speak with a voice that carried a newfound strength and clarity. "You don't control us. We're not afraid of you anymore. We've faced our fears and overcome them." Michael's words seemed to pierce through the Watcher's dark form, causing it to waver and distort. The Watcher's presence grew more chaotic, its form fracturing under the combined force of their courage. As the friends continued the ritual, the Watcher's power began to wane. The symbols on the altar glowed with a brilliant light, and the chamber's oppressive energy began to lift. The Watcher's form became unstable, its dark essence fracturing and dissipating. Emily, her voice steady, called out the final incantations with a mix of desperation and determination. "We are free from your grasp. Your power over us ends here." The Watcher let out a final piercing shriek, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the mansion. Its dark form shattered into countless fragments, which dissolved into nothingness. The oppressive energy that had filled the chamber evaporated, leaving behind a sense of calm and relief. The chamber's walls seemed to settle, and the dark symbols began to fade. The friends, exhausted but victorious, looked at each other with a mix of relief and triumph. As the Watcher's influence dissipated, the mansion began to change. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the once foreboding halls now seemed less menacing. The mansion's dark grip had been broken, and the friends felt a sense of liberation. Michael, though changed by his experiences, seemed more grounded and aware. His eyes, while still haunted, held a spark of hope and recognition. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm sorry for everything. I was lost, but I'm back now." Emily, Sarah, and Jake embraced him, their relief palpable. "We're just glad you're safe," Emily said. "We've all been through so much." With the Watcher defeated and the mansion's dark hold broken, the friends set out to find a way to leave Hollow Grove. The roads outside were now clear, and the first light of morning began to pierce through the overcast sky, signaling a new beginning. They left the mansion behind, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they had faced together. The experience had changed them, but it had also given them a new appreciation for their own strength and resilience. As they drove away from Hollow Grove, the friends looked back one last time. The mansion stood silent and still, its dark secrets laid bare and its malevolent power dispelled. They had faced their fears and emerged victorious, ready to embrace a future free from the shadows of the past. Chapter 10: The Final Twist. The friends were almost at the threshold of escape. The storm had completely abated, and the mansion's once ominous presence now seemed merely a distant memory. Emily, Sarah, and Jake had made their way back to the front door, the faint light of dawn guiding their path. The feeling of liberation was palpable as they prepared to leave Hollow Grove for good. But as they reached the front gate, a chilling realization struck Emily. Something wasn't right. She turned to look at Michael, who was trailing behind them with an unsettling calm. There was a coldness in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before, a coldness that spoke of hidden intentions. As they neared the gate, Emily hesitated, her instincts screaming that something was off. She pulled Michael aside, away from the others, her voice low and urgent. "Michael, what's going on? We're so close to getting out of here. Why aren't you moving?" Michael's expression darkened, and he gave her a cold, calculating look. "It's too late for that, Emily. The entity needs more than just fear, it needs sacrifice. And you've all been so wonderfully cooperative." Emily's heart raced as the truth began to dawn on her. Michael's eyes, once haunted, now gleamed with a malevolent glint. He had been the puppet master all along, manipulating them into coming to the estate. His intention wasn't to escape. It was to feed the entity with fresh fear and despair, prolonging its existence. Michael's demeanor shifted from calm to sinister. "I had to make sure the entity stayed strong. The mansion feeds on fear, and I've been its caretaker. You see, the Watcher wasn't just a force. It was a part of me, and I was part of it." The revelation hit Emily like a thunderclap. The mansion's malevolence wasn't just an external force. It had been entwined with Michael's very being. He had orchestrated their arrival and their ordeal, all to keep the entity's hunger at bay. Sarah and Jake, sensing the tension, turned back and saw Michael's transformation. Sarah's face blanched with horror. "Michael, no. This isn't you." Michael's expression remained unyielding. "It is me, Sarah. The Watcher has become part of me, and now it's time for the final act. You're going to help me keep it alive." The air seemed to grow heavier as Michael began to chant in an ancient, guttural language. The symbols on the mansion's walls began to glow ominously, and a dark, swirling energy coalesced around him. The Watcher's presence, once diminished, began to surge back to life, drawing power from Michael's dark ritual. Emily, Sarah, and Jake were thrown into a desperate struggle. The entity's power surged with renewed strength, its dark form expanding and twisting. The mansion seemed to come alive with a malevolent force, the walls shifting and distorting to trap them. "Michael, stop this!" Emily shouted, her voice filled with both fear and defiance. "We're not going to let you do this." Michael, his eyes glazed with dark energy, didn't respond. Instead, he advanced toward them, the Watcher's power amplifying his strength. Emily, Sarah, and Jake knew they had to confront him and the entity in a final, climactic battle. The friends fought with every ounce of their strength. Emily, drawing on her courage, faced Michael directly. "You may have manipulated us, but we're stronger than you think. We've faced our fears, and we won't let you or the Watcher win." Sarah and Jake joined her, their resolve unshakable. They chanted the counter-ritual they had learned from the ancient documents, their voices blending with the energy of the chamber. The Watcher's dark energy fought back, its power manifesting in nightmarish forms that clawed at their minds and bodies. The chamber was a battleground of light and darkness. Emily and her friends fought against the dark figures that emerged from the Watcher's power, distorted versions of their own fears. The symbols on the walls flared with intense energy, and the air was thick with an otherworldly force. In the midst of the chaos, Michael's true intention became clear. His goal was not merely to keep the Watcher alive, but to create a new form of darkness that would perpetuate itself indefinitely. The friends had to stop him before it was too late. Emily realized that the only way to defeat Michael and the Watcher was to sever their connection completely. She needed to disrupt the ritual and destroy the source of the Watcher's power. With a surge of determination, she grabbed the locket from the altar, the focal point of the ritual. "Jake! Sarah, help me!" Emily shouted. "We need to destroy the locket." Jake and Sarah rushed to her side. They fought off the nightmarish figures and held back Michael, who was now a twisted figure of darkness and rage. Emily, with Jake and Sarah's help, smashed the locket against the altar. The locket shattered, and the chamber was engulfed in a blinding light. The Watcher let out a final, anguished scream as its form disintegrated into a cascade of dark energy. The mansion's walls trembled and cracked, the malevolent force dissipating as the Watcher's power was severed. As the blinding light faded, the chamber returned to its original state, devoid of the dark energy that had once filled it. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the mansion's walls seemed to settle into a calm silence. The friends, exhausted and bruised, stood amidst the remnants of the battle. Michael lay on the ground, his dark energy dissipated. His eyes were no longer hollow but filled with a sense of clarity. He looked at Emily, Sarah, and Jake with a mix of regret and relief. I'm sorry," Michael said weakly. "I thought I was saving myself, but I only ended up perpetuating the darkness. You've ended it. Thank you." Emily, though relieved, felt a deep sadness for what Michael had become. "We've all been through so much," she said, "but it's over now." The friends, their bonds strengthened by the ordeal, left the mansion behind. The storm had cleared completely, and the sky was a brilliant, clear blue. The roads were open, and the way out of Hollow Grove was finally clear. As they drove away, the mansion receded into the distance, a silent monument to the horrors they had faced. They had survived the Watcher's wrath and Michael's betrayal, emerging with their spirits and their friendship intact. The experience had changed them, but it had also shown them their own strength and resilience. The darkness of Hollow Grove was now behind them, and they were ready to embrace a future free from the shadows of the past. Chapter 11: The Aftermath. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the landscape as Emily, Sarah, and Jake drove away from Hollow Grove. The once menacing mansion receded into the distance, gradually becoming just a dark smudge on the horizon. The roads were clear now, and the storm had given way to a serene, almost picturesque setting. Yet, despite the calm exterior, an unsettling feeling lingered among the friends. Emily glanced at her friends, her thoughts racing. The horrors of Hollow Grove were still fresh in her mind, each detail vivid and haunting. She had always been drawn to the unknown, her curiosity leading her to the estate, but it was the terrifying reality of their experiences that had opened her eyes to the dangers that lurk beyond the familiar. "Is everyone okay?" Emily asked, her voice breaking the silence that had settled over the group. Sarah, still shaken but visibly relieved, nodded. "I think we're all just trying to process everything. That place, it was like nothing I've ever experienced." Jake, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, let out a long sigh. "We made it out. That's what matters. But I can't shake the feeling that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg." Emily's heart sank at Jake's words. She had hoped that leaving Hollow Grove would close the chapter on their nightmarish ordeal, but Jake's observation struck a chord. The mansion had been a place of unimaginable terror, and the fact that they had barely scratched the surface of its dark secrets was deeply troubling. As they continued their journey, Emily couldn't help but replay the events in her mind. The discovery of Michael's betrayal and the climactic battle with the Watcher had been grueling. Yet, despite their victory, the mansion's malignant presence seemed to have left an indelible mark on them. The drive back to civilization was long and silent. The friends spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts. Emily, despite her exhaustion, found herself grappling with the aftermath of their ordeal. The estate, with all its secrets and horrors, was now a part of her, and she wondered if she would ever truly escape its shadow. As they passed through familiar towns and landmarks, the sense of normalcy felt surreal. The world outside Hollow Grove seemed almost too ordinary in comparison. Emily and her friends had been through something extraordinary, something that had forever altered their perception of reality. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Emily tried to move forward, but the memories of Hollow Grove were persistent, a dark cloud that hovered just at the edge of her consciousness. She found herself drawn to old newspapers and online articles about disappearances and strange occurrences, seeking answers to questions that had been left unresolved. One evening, while researching online, Emily stumbled across an article about an old, abandoned estate with a troubling history. The estate's description and location matched Hollow Grove almost exactly. Her heart raced as she read about the estate's past, a series of tragic events and mysterious disappearances that spanned decades. The article mentioned something that sent a chill down her spine, a series of recent disappearances that seemed eerily similar to their own experiences. The article suggested that the Watcher was not a singular entity but part of a network of dark forces that fed on fear and despair. It implied that Hollow Grove was merely one of many such places, each feeding the dark network that sought to expand its influence. Emily reached out to Sarah and Jake, sharing her findings. They agreed to meet and discuss the implications. The reunion was somber, the shadows of their past experiences evident in their eyes. "I thought we were done with it," Sarah said quietly. "But it seems like the darkness didn't just end with Hollow Grove." Jake nodded. If what Emily found is true, there could be more out there. Places like Hollow Grove that feed off fear. Emily's curiosity was reignited, but this time it was tempered by a newfound caution. "We need to be careful. Our experiences at Hollow Grove showed us how real and dangerous these things can be." Despite the lingering shadows of their past, Emily, Sarah, and Jake decided to channel their experiences into something positive. They began working together to investigate and expose other places with similar dark histories, using their experiences to help others who might unknowingly be drawn into such horrors. They created a small investigative team dedicated to uncovering and documenting the truth behind mysterious occurrences and ancient legends. Their goal was to shine a light on the darkness, to protect others from falling into the same traps they had narrowly escaped. As they delved into their new mission, Emily found solace in knowing that their experiences were not in vain. The bond forged through their shared ordeal gave them strength and purpose. They had faced the unimaginable and survived, and now they sought to ensure that others could do the same. The estate of Hollow Grove remained a haunting memory, a chilling reminder of the shadows that lurk in the unknown. Yet, it also served as a testament to their courage and resilience. They had ventured into the darkness, faced their deepest fears, and emerged stronger, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. And as they continued their journey, Emily knew that while the shadows of Hollow Grove might never completely fade, they had the strength to face whatever new mysteries and dangers awaited them. The darkness might linger, but it would never conquer the light they carried within.